I feel that we have delivered to the city of St. Louis what we promised. A very exciting club that would be competitive faster maybe than any new franchise in any sport in history.
We actually made the playoffs. This ragamuffin, put together from scratch team, but our first round opponent was the defending champion, New York Nets.
Have a little champagne.
The Spirits, they were 26 full games behind the Nets in the standings, had lost to them all 11 times by an average of 19 points a game.
We were a dominant team, and we were somewhat destined to win back-to-back.
Pandemonium as the New York Nets win.
Spirits, they had as much talent as anybody, but they would just self-destruct in the fourth quarter.
We're not afraid of them. We don't fear any team. We consider the playoffs a brand new season, and we're coming out to play together and to win.
What I wanted to talk about was a history segment, Spirit of St. Louis. It was an ABA team that came out around 1968. There was maybe about 8 or 9 ABA teams. They competed against the NBA, had a different style, introduced a three-point shot, and so forth. Why this is important? You've heard of Bobby Bonilla in baseball, and everybody talks about it every year, that one payment that he always gets from the Mets, okay? And they say how good of a contract that was in sports. You realize that other athletes get that payment as well, and that is not the best deal in sports history. Why I'm focused on St. Louis? That was the best deal in sports history. So what happened was, when the ABA and the NBA merged around 96,
I don't have a lot of history on the ABA. I have some history. Carl here is going to fill you in on it. The only history that I have with the ABA is if Jackie Moon, if Jackie Moon from semi-pro Will Ferrell had lied to me. If I'm wrong, I think it was 4 teams when the ABA dissolved. I think 4 teams
came into the
NBA. That is true.
Yes,
I know for a fact that one of them was the San Antonio Spurs.
Right. Nuggets.
Denver Nuggets. I don't know the other 2.
The
New Jersey.
Nets.
The Nets were Julius. Was Julius there? Well, he was.
He was there with them.
Right. Okay. And who was the 4th team? I don't know the 4th team.
Denver Nuggets, Spurs. I'm trying to think. I thought we covered them on the Nets and...
Nets, Nuggets, Spurs.
There's somebody that we're missing. It'll come to me.
It wasn't the Flint Tropics, folks. I tell you that.
Right.
Anyway, that is pretty much my experience of what I know with the ABA. They were a short-lived league, and they had a different colored ball.
Exactly.
That's what I know, but...
Now, given the landscape of the 70s... Basketball was one of those fringe sports at that point. They had a lot of drug issues, a lot heavy in cocaine, heavy into marijuana and so forth back then. And all of the games weren't live, so it was a different landscape. Hell, even some of the NBA finals were tape delayed. Meaning, you wouldn't even know.
Used to talk about that, and they say, for example, Kobe, when the games were live in the 80s, he would get tapes from his grandmother to watch the games.
Exactly.
Anyway, sorry.
It wasn't full-on access to everybody. Dr. J, kind of was the highlight of the league, with the ABA. The NBA, of course, you had the Kareems, Wilt had retired, Russell had retired, and NBA was kind of like that standard bearer, like, okay, all about the rules. We only played a certain way. Didn't want to change and so forth. With the ABA, they tried different things with the three-point shot, different color ball, dunk contest, all of the stuff. So, it's like, what does that have to do with the greatest deal in sports? Well, I'm about to tell you.
Fill us in, Carl, please. I'm curious.
All right, here is the greatest deal. So there was a set of owners in the ABA where it was like they only chose 4 of the teams to go in from the ABA to the NBA. We highlighted 3 of them, possibly 4, and
Leave the 4th in the comment below. My dad, I know you're watching. Leave it down below if you know.
Right, and it may come to us later, but that doesn't matter because we're not talking about that. So the deal that was worked out was each team had a chance to be acquired into the NBA as a full owner, and you obviously get the revenue from the games, so forth, so on. So out of the 7 teams, there was 3 that was not chosen. Kentucky Colonels, Virginia Squires, and some other one-off team.
The Flint Tropics.
And you know what? The other team, I believe, was the Pacers, the Indiana Pacers.
It was. He's right. That is true.
That's
it is the
4th
Pacers.
team.
Pacers, Nuggets, Nets, Spurs.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong, George Gervin, known for the finger roll, was on the Spurs.
That's right.
Okay.
And he played with the Bulls as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So, anyhow,
Iceman.
there was the owners that did not get picked to go into the league was compensated anywhere between $3.5 million to as much as $8 million. And some of them would take the deal that was put in front of them. Some of them negotiated their own deals, so forth and so on. There was one team that used to be in Carolina. They were called the Carolina Cougars. That was purchased by the Silna brothers, Ozzie and Daniel Silna. Okay. What happened with that deal was they wanted to move them out of Carolina. They moved them to St. Louis, which was one of the bigger markets at the time that didn't have a pro team. So they figured, all right, let's move them here. Let's call them the Spirits of St. Louis. And yes, that's based off of Charles Lindbergh and the Flight and so forth from 1928. For people that really want to go and do history, that's where the name came from. And, you know, they played for 2 seasons. They made the playoffs the first year, and then the second year they didn't do anything or whatever. And one of the players that they had in the contract was Moses Malone. Moses Malone came out of that particular team and so forth. So one of the deals with the NBA, if your team also didn't get picked, each player that was picked in the expansion draft going to whichever teams, you would get paid $2.5 million per player that was picked.
So let's just say, sorry to cut you off, I'm make sure I have the facts right for the viewers at home.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say, I don't know, Steph Curry. We're going to go modern here because the youngins don't know.
Right.
Stephen Curry and the Golden State Warriors are dissolving. And the bottom line is, let's just say Stephen Curry gets picked up by the Utah Jazz. The owner of, and I don't know the owner of the Warriors, I'm sorry, I'm not a huge Warriors fan, he would get paid $2.5 million for each player that were to go.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that was picked in this expansion draft. And also compensated for losing the team. And it's like, okay, what's the significance of that? It's like, well, you know, I guess it's kind of a goodwill type of deal. Like, okay, we're sorry that you lost your team, and then we're picking this player to go play for Miami Heat or whatever team that's left over. So we're compensating you for that. So the Silnas decided, instead of taking the deal that the NBA had, them and their attorney decided to make a different type of deal. They wanted to make a deal based off of the revenue of the league. So,
well, I can see how that would benefit. Look where we are.
Well, back
where they
then,
went.
But back
Even
then,
then,
you didn't think that the NBA
Right.
would even survive much less.
It was very much so, right around the similar time frame, it was very much so, I think it was Magic Johnson and, was it Converse or Reebok?
Converse.
He signed, Magic Johnson signed with Converse.
Also Bird.
Bird. Right, but Bird came, right, same time frame. Yeah.
Came in this
And they signed, and it was a lucrative deal. There was good money. But Nike had come to them and offered them this much, whatever, some sort of money. The bottom line is they turned it down, and then Michael Jordan did take up Nike, and look what happened to Nike. That sort of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
All right, good analogy. And so, based off of that particular deal, now, mind you, here's what the deal was. And this is what goes on with the NBA now, because a lot of people really don't talk about ownership when it comes to these sports. There's a revenue sharing pool. So, based off of ticket sales, based off of television rights, all of these deals that they have, merchandise, you name it. Right now, you know, you have the NIL, the name, image, and likeness deals. So, you put that on the owner's end of the scale, and it's like, okay, like he mentioned, like Converse or Reebok or Nike or whatever. An owner could go and sign a particular deal with a particular company, but then there's a certain revenue sharing pool where everything goes into. So, like, if you sign a $500 million deal, then 10% has to go back into the league so it can be shared amongst the rest of the owners. That's pretty much how it works.
So what you're getting at is, and you'll finish the story, but the way it sounds it's going is, the Similar brothers worked on a deal to where, let's just say you own I'm going to use the Flint Tropics. Let's just say you own the Flint, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Coffee Black goes to the Spurs.
Yeah.
You get your $4 million from the NBA plus 2.5 for Coffee Black.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you've got $6.5 million.
Right.
And that's all you get.
Right.
They, and what it sounds like they ended up doing, is negotiate a deal to where they made long-term money.
There you
they
go.
didn't just stop at $6 million, or let's just say two guys got picked, $10 million. They took a shot and a risk that the NBA would blow up, and when that did happen, they made lots and lots of money, longer than just their $10 million right up front.
Exactly.
Okay.
And now let me explain how that worked. So, basically, with the revenue sharing deal, you know, basically at the end of the year, end of the season or whatever, this pool of money would go back to the owners. And now, you know, you think about the salary cap and stuff like that. That's how they base the salary cap. Not just in basketball, but, you know, football and other sports that have a salary cap, salary floor, whatever. Because that's like a whole nother episode with me talking about the salary cap or whatever.
We'll get there. We have lots of content on our roadmap for you. Stay tuned.
So anyway, here's the deal. So the Silners basically negotiated a deal as if the team was still there. So if you look at the structure of the NBA revenue, and you know, if there's a SEC filing, you know, Security Exchange Commission, that goes with the NBA, you can actually see that how many teams are in the league. Is it 30? 30 teams? You'll see a revenue.
Yeah, there's 30 teams in the league. Yes, that's correct. There are 30 teams.
You will see 31 teams. And then it's like, well, where the hell is the other team?
It's St. Louis.
It's St. Louis. So they have a placeholder just for the Spirits of St. Louis. And even to this day.
Got passed down.
Yes.
Man, it's
smart, one of those
smart people. Holy crap!
So, but you have to understand, how did they get to this deal? That'll be the main question. It's like, well, why the hell would the NBA even do something like that? First of all, if you split in revenues based off of only $500 million,
this is no big deal.
That's not enough money. So it's like, okay, we'll sign them a check over. You split 500 million times 31 divided by 31. That's not a lot of money. Now you're talking about billions of dollars, and you're splitting that revenue. That's a hell of a lot of money. So the Silners and that attorney, whoever he was, you know, a god sent to them, because it's like all of their revenue, they get that revenue share at the end of the year, end of the season, and they've been doing that for almost 50 years now. The NBA over the years tried to negotiate themselves out of that deal because and he already mentioned about Magic, Larry. So when they came into the league, obviously television rights changed. Games were being aired live. You had all of these commercials. You had all of these sponsors that the ownership groups were signing. So guess what? The revenues exploded around that time. Okay? So now you're not talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. You're talking about billions of dollars. Then you get into tens of billions of dollars, you know? And the Sooners were still getting a cut of it. And here's the difference with their here's their difference with their cut versus somebody like the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
Lakers, you got operating expenses. You got a stadium.
Yeah, it's all take home for the Sooners. What are they doing?
Exactly.
Sitting there, they're like Al Pacino.
So
well, that's not a good analogy because he's got cocaine, right?
Well, you think about it. They're getting a check just for sitting there. You know, it's one thing if you got it for 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. Okay, you know, that's good enough. You out of here. They signed that deal where it's like even the subsidiaries, even if they decided to close the NBA and open up another league that was formed from the NBA, they will still get those rights. Tell me that's not the greatest deal in the history of sports that you ever thought of.
Here's why I would say it is. You know what I noticed from a younger person's perspective right off the bat? When he talked about the ABA merging and closing and these NBA giving these ABA owners basically compensation for their team at $3.5 million for up to $8 million, right?
Correct.
So when you sold an NBA team back then, it might be $8 million.
Right.
Look at when I know that recently. I know that Steve Ballmer bought the was it 10 years ago now, the Clippers?
About, yeah.
I know there have been more recent purchases than the Clippers.
Right.
And you look at the value of the teams. For example, the Redskins, Commanders, were just bought last year.
$6 billion.
And it's because Steve Ballmer is the only example that I can think of off the top of my head for NBA ownership. He bought the franchise, and this was 10 years ago, mind you. And I think the number was $2.8 billion. That tells you how that is why I would say, just from hearing the story, it is the greatest sports deal of all time, because it went from $8 million to $2.8 billion. And that's one team. I don't know the exact number, but I bet you Jerry Buss bought the Lakers in, what was it, 83, 84 he bought them? Or was it earlier? I think it was 79, 80.
Yeah.
I bet you he bought them for, what's your guess? What do you think? Maybe 20 million? Maybe?
Could be. About 20, 25.
The net value of the Lakers right now, I think, is 3.9 or something.
Exactly.
And where we were and where we are is insane with the money. The players a year, the mid-level players are making more money than what the franchise was worth in 1975.
And so you have to understand this. You always hear about the player contracts, but you very seldom hear the ownership side of the revenue. Because you only hear about the ownership side when it comes to the purchase or valuation.
Right.
You never hear about it as in terms of operating revenue. And because it's going to be a boring conversation. And plus you're talking about astronomical numbers.
Right, but you bring up a good point. I personally do not, as a fan. Who wants to sit there and talk about what some dude in a suit, for example, I think it's Tony Khan is a Jaguar owner. No one wants to talk about how much money Tony Khan made last year.
Yeah, the father.
It's very Shahad or whatever.
Yeah,
it's very boring, like you said. People want to talk about how much money is the quarterback making, because who are they seeing on the field every week?
Exactly.
They're not seeing Shahid Khan or Ben. If I'm pronouncing his name wrong, I apologize. I don't know everything. Shocking, right? But we don't really care about what Shahid Khan is making because one, he's a boring dude in a suit,
right?
And two, it just makes the rest of us feel bad,
right? I think that's why they don't talk about it.
But we do care more or less what Trevor Lawrence is making because he's the guy on the field, which brings me to another point. I think I told you this when we last talked on the phone a couple weeks ago. Not a couple weeks ago. Anyway, it brings me to what Trevor Lawrence is making, and we're going to go off topic here just a little bit before we finish up the segment.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'm willing to admit when somebody is better than me at something.
Right.
For example, I don't know, I'll pick Steven Stamkos. For those of you who don't know who that is, he was a Tampa Bay Lightning hockey player for 16 years. He now plays for the Predators. Not important. Anyway, he's a hockey player.
Mm-hmm.
That dude is getting paid $8 million a year for the next 4 years.
Right.
He is worth every single penny. He's every single penny better than me at ice hockey.
Right.
I can't play ice hockey.
Right.
Trevor Lawrence is getting paid $55 million.
Right.
I'm a decently athletic, 20-something-year-old, in-shape, 6'5" man.
Mm-hmm.
Trevor Lawrence is not $55 million better than me at throwing a football.
Right.
He might be $2 million.
Right.
I can't play ice hockey for the life of me. I can play hockey, but I can't skate backwards and do it. It's just not possible.
Mm-hmm.
I can go out there and throw a halfway decent football.
Mm-hmm.
You watched, for those of you who watched Tua Tagovailoa last week play football against the Bills, you're here to tell me that guy is $50 million better than me at throwing a football? He was running out of, he threw that ball in and got picked off for a pick six. I could have done that.
Now, I'm going to correct you. 60.
Okay, I'm wrong. 60. The bottom line is he's not $60 million better than me at throw football. If you were to pay me $1 million, I could go out there and I'm not saying I could make every throw because I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't throw the ball 70 yards, but I can throw the ball 45 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And I could probably complete 30 to 35% of my passes.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number I'm willing to say I could complete. They're completing close to 60.
Mm-hmm.
So they're double better than me, but they're not $60 million. That's all I'm saying. It just got me brought up to, we talk about player salary. It also makes me feel bad, but if they're smart enough to get a rich franchise to give them that much money,
Mm-hmm.
good for them. And I understand why they're getting paid, because people like us pay the money to see them and pay for the shirts. I get it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also a bit ridiculous.
And to finish up the segment, basically, their deal is still in place to this day. Here it is. What is today? September
18th, 2024. So
They are
88,
still-
98, 08, 18. It's been 46 years.
And
they're
still-
still making money, and the league is huge. And every game is streamed live. They even have a NBA League Pass.
And see, they get them all of that
Revenue from that. And they're getting my money because I got an email today from Roku that my subscription is set to renew on October 18th.
See?
4 days before the season starts for $109.99.
Now, and
I will pay.
And I'm gonna say a bit of side commentary about that deal. They had no idea that this league would explode like that because they made the deal in perpetuity, thinking.
Why did they? Yeah, why? How did? Because
Well,
now
they
they
didn't think the league would last that long, and they wanted to get their money's worth while they still had
Because
a
I'm
league.
sitting here, you're thinking now they look like geniuses, but in 1975, I'm just using, I know it was 78, but or 76,
Yeah.
whatever. In 1975, I bet you 80% of the owners would sit there and say you're ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because look where the league was, like you said.
Yeah. Because it was like, okay, this league might not be here 10 years from now.
Right, but it was, and now you look like geniuses. So, the main things I think we should all take away from it. Number one is it is the greatest deal in the history of sports. And number two, look at the growth we have in all sports.
I know. Yeah. So, that is my little history segment this week. Spirit of St. Louis. And I know there's other ones that's covered it, but just a different perspective. Just to think about how did they get there, and it's like that's how they got there. They didn't think that league would be there 10 years from that point that they signed that deal, because it was just like how the WNBA was 10 years ago. Nobody talked about it. So it was like, let's make this ridiculous deal and get our investment back.
While we have the chance, and then
But
if
the
it
deal
turns out
was
great, it turns out great.
But the deal was signed so ironclad that they could not break the deal. The NBA had to literally go to negotiations and try to pay them a lump sum. They tried to pay them a lump sum of $500 million. They tried to pay them $1 billion. They tried everything they could to get them
off
out of
and
the
get 'em
deal.
right.
And they was like, dude, we're going to keep this deal until we're dead and gone.
And then we'll give it to my kid, and then give it to their kid, and then to their kid
But
after
that's
that.
how good that contract was written. So
Yeah,
that's
because
the
I bet you neither side thought it would, right?
Yeah, I mean,
The
if
NBA
you-
didn't have the belief in themselves that, of course they do now, obviously, but they didn't back then.
they probably looked at this like it's monopoly money. We ain't going to be here anyway, so let's
And the hell
decide.
with it,
Yeah.
right, basically.
So that's the greatest deal. So whenever you hear Bobby Bonilla Day, think about the spirit of St. Louis or the spirits of St. Louis. And that's the greatest deal in sports history so far. All right. We'll catch you on the next one.